Hey, we're here. We just survived our first birthday party. Our friends did a wonderful job and it was a lot of fun. So this week, it was kind of supposed to be like a chill week and I don't feel like that happened. But I think we had fun. We did our theme this week on Alice in Wonderland. So Walt Disney actually thought about doing a Alice in Wonderland film back in the 1930s when he was first doing full featured animation productions. But originally he wanted to do it as a hybrid live action animation film, kind of like Mary Poppins and Song of the South. But because of World War II and some other things that were happening with the company, he ended up pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And just like everything else in Disney, no good idea dies. And they finally decided to do it as their 13th production and released it in 1951. Now, I guess back then you were actually required to read Lewis Carroll's books because they were good English literature. And so Walt Disney grew up reading the Alice in Wonderland books. But what was really interesting was a lot of the critics actually criticized Alice in Wonderland for Americanizing English literature too much. Did you know that?
No. I didn't know any of this stuff you've been talking about so far.
Well, it's called Wikipedia. But actually, Alice in Wonderland wasn't as well received as, say, Cinderella or Snow White. Some people say it was just because Alice wasn't like as warm of a character, and other people pointed to the fact that they had so many directors that were in charge of different things, and so you know, you have one director doing one scene, another director doing a different scene, another director doing another scene. They all just kind of like wanted to one-up each other, so it ended up just being this really chaotic movie.
That's a good word for it.
And so, I mean, Alice in Wonderland wasn't really re-released a lot. They did a shortened version of it for the Disneyland TV series. But when the 1970s came around, Alice in Wonderland as a book kind of became a cult hit with people who may or may not have had some drug interaction. And so they actually, first of all, Walt Disney kind of didn't want to have that association, but then in the 1970s they did re-release Alice in Wonderland, and it ended up being a huge hit. They branded it as, like psychedelic or whatever.
Of course it was a huge hit. Yeah.
And then they also decided to re-release it. It was one of the first home videos that you could buy on VHS. So that's some of the history behind Alice in Wonderland.
Watch the caterpillar do drugs, man.
Oh my gosh.
So this week when we watched the movie, we decided that we were going to do an English tea party because it is the British way. And
it had mixed results.
And now it is time for Pinterest Success or Failure. This is the segment where we take a pin off of Pinterest and see if it actually works in real life.
This week, we will be trying lemon tart and scones. So let me begin by saying that I have never made a lemon tart before. What was really interesting about this lemon tart was a lot of the ingredients were actually measured out by weight, which is something very common, I think, in European recipes and not necessarily American ones. Also, you put together the crust in a pretty traditional way by actually putting it in the food processor instead of a mixer. There's also a lot of prep time where you have to put the crust in the fridge and use cold butter and things like that. So this is definitely not one of those last minute things that you want to do. And then on top of that, I was also trying to make a crust that was gluten-free, which tends to crumble a ton, as you will see by me putting it in the saran wrap right here. Whenever you're working with gluten-free crusts, it's really important to use a lot of flour on your surface so that it is way easier to pick up afterwards. Another new thing was that you were supposed to bake the crust with rice on top of it. I guess it's to make sure that the crust stays flat. Now you can imagine with a lemon tart, you use a lot of lemons. And I mean a lot of lemons. You're also going to spend a lot of time zesting all of those lemons. And when you're done with that, you're going to spend a lot of time juicing all of those lemons. That was honestly one of the most time-consuming parts. The other time-consuming part was putting together the actual middle part of the tart, the custard, so to speak. It takes a long time to cook. The other thing you will notice is that I am using a cheesecake pan, and this was basically where my recipe was doomed. I tried to find a lemon tart pan, but apparently Walmart does not carry these, and I ran out of time to Amazon it. So I tried using the cheesecake pan thinking that it might work, but it ended up making the tart too thick, and therefore it did not cook properly and ended up being a wet, gooey mess. Now this is the part of the show where Jared and Maddie have afternoon tea. Now Jared and Maddie have never been to afternoon tea, so there are a few things that they need to know. Any person that goes to afternoon tea needs to know that you cannot show up in just anything. You need to dress appropriately. Also, tea should not be served in tea bags. Instead, you must use the loose leaf tea and pour it into the pot. This is proper tea drinking. And of course, you should not use those ugly American mugs. No, instead you must have beautiful, pretty, proper British teacups. And now Jared and Maddie can sit down and have a proper British afternoon tea. Okay, so for our tea party, we are trying English breakfast black tea. And we are trying organic oolong.
Also, we're uncivilized Americans, so we don't have a proper, cream thingy.
It is the American way.
So we have our scones over here. We have our little sandwiches over here. With our, one random one that's on a different piece of bread. So these are roast beef, and these are ham. The roast beef has mayo, the ham has mustard.
So yes, you put the tea in there without the filter, and then you pour the water straight on the tea in the teapot. Yes. That's what it said to do!
No wonder they lost.
So your spoon is supposed to go on the outside. And you do not drink with your pinky up. Pinky's in. As bad as I was expecting. It's strong.
Stop being OCD about the plates and just drink your tea.
I can't get this spoon. They're 12 o'clock.
No, you're supposed to put it on the plate.
Oh. Do I tap once or twice?
I don't know.
Whatever.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like it?
I think I'll stick with my water.
Okay.
Not terrible or anything. It's just this weird tasting water with milk and sugar in it.
Pretty much.
You feeling good now? Say hi to Daddy. Yeah. Is that Daddy? Yeah. Anyways, I think we had a lot of fun still. I learned a lot. I think you learned a lot.
Belching is not part of British tea time.
No, it's not. And we will see you guys next week.